Hello, and here we are again on Basic Folk. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. I am your host, Cindy Howes. Let's get into it. Molly Obomsawin. This is a great episode. Molly is the mighty bassist, songwriter, singer from Lula Wiles, whose musical talents run tandem to her activist spirit. She actually really had no choice in the matter, seeing that her parents met through their advocacy for Abenaki and First Nations sovereignty battles. Molly's dad is a member of the Odanak Abenaki Nation, and her mom at the time they met was following and supporting tribal land claim initiatives. Along with Lula Wiles, her solo career, which is a bit of a new venture for Molly, and her side player gigs, Molly works with several racial and environmental justice organizations based in Wabanaki homelands, and is the founder and executive director of Bomazine Land Trust. She is a crucial voice when it comes to speaking out for First Nation representation and justice in the roots music world and beyond. She is generous with her knowledge, but also, as her Twitter profile reads, "Pay me for educating you," which you can do. She has her PayPal linked right there, and I will link it on our website. Molly grew up in rural Maine among 5 siblings and was constantly surrounded by music in her family. Her dad is a musician, and Molly was always performing as a little kid, constantly trying to make people happy and laugh while being a goofball. She was also made aware of the cruel stereotypes and racism in the world at an early age through mainstream culture. As she became older, she gravitated towards the upright bass and talks in the pod about her jazz sensibilities and what drew her to the instrument. She also talks about how she came to songwriting last, but has managed to successfully combine a very rad, sweepy, dreamlike style while, quote, puncturing the dream haze of our apocalyptic capitalist world. On the new Lula Wiles album, Shame and Sedition, Molly's songs really shine through, with highlights being Everybody Connected, Do You Really Want the World to End, and In Dreams. I look forward to more conversations with Molly, hopefully about a solo record. No pressure, Molly. We'll take a listen to a song from Lula Wiles' new album, and then we'll get to our conversation with Molly Obomsawin on Basic Folk. Here is Do You Really Want the World to End from Lula Wiles on Basic Folk.
If I could only reach you, I would tell you, I would teach you. If you could only see me, I would show you, I would meet you halfway. I would take you there, I would make you care about people like me and my friends. Do you really want the world to end? Do you really want the world to end?
Molly, thanks so much for talking to me today. It's so great to see you.
Nice to see you too. Yeah, thanks for having me.
I, first of all, want to preface this interview by saying that I feel like you should have your own podcast where I interview you every week about all the things that you do, because there's like so much to cover here. So we probably won't get to everything, but we'll do our best.
Great, sounds good.
So, all right, it's my understanding that your parents met through activism for Abenaki and First Nations sovereignty battles in a Vermont courtroom, in fact. And your dad is a member of the Abenaki tribe, and your mom is not, but was like a huge supporter and follower. She was a nursing student when they met. What is the story of like who they were when they met and what they were doing at the time?
Nice. I like this starting point.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this is in the late 80s, I think, or early 90s when my parents met. my mom is Jewish. She's from New York. And my dad is, he's a citizen at Odanak, Abenaki Nation, which is in Quebec. And he started doing a lot more. He's a musician as well. So he started getting a lot more involved in activism as like the AIM movement was really picking up steam in the 70s and 80s.
Which movement?
American Indian Movement, AIM.
Okay.
Yes. That was really big for Indian country. And a lot of nations ended up getting federal recognition in the 70s, especially, as an outcome of the movement that was going on.
So that's like relatively a new thing.
What is?
The federally recognized.
So, I can explain it a little bit. So a lot of tribal nations have been sort of federally recognized since the beginning of America, I guess. And basically how that was determined was if you had a treaty and there was like treaty negotiations between your tribe and the United States government, that forms like a federally recognized status. But a lot of nations didn't have, ongoing treaties per se with the nation after the late 1800s. And so some of them didn't have this status as federally recognized, even though they are nations and they have been nations since before America was a nation, right? That's what that's derived from. But in the 70s and 80s through the American Indian movement, folks were going through the federal recognition process, folks who didn't have tribal status as a federally recognized tribe.
Like those who didn't have it to begin with, or those who had lost it?
Exactly. Yeah, a lot had lost it, and many, especially out here in the East, didn't have it to begin with, because by the time, I guess, America was founded, right, declared itself a nation, the East had already been having, Eastern tribes had already been having interactions with colonial settlers and colonizers for hundreds of years, right? So the whole like treaties movement and federal recognition thing kind of skipped over a lot of the Eastern folks at first, right? And I think in the 70s especially, that's when you see some of the tribes in Connecticut, the Pequot and everything, getting recognized, and the tribes of Maine with the Maine Indian Claims Settlement Act and their federal recognition in, I think, 1975, but I could be wrong about that. So anyway, a lot of these tribes realizing that they don't have this status, and with that status comes reservation land, federally reserved land, which is, important, and basically the government has some responsibility, fiscal responsibility and whatnot. And there's also jurisdictional implications, I guess, of federal recognition. Wow, we went here fast.
That's right.
It's okay. So, so in Vermont at that time, the Missisquoi, there's a community in Swanton, Missisquoi area, which is like the top of Lake Champlain. It's really close to the border in Vermont. And historically, there was a tribal community there that my nation, Odanak, had a lot of engagement with, interaction with, and sort of like fluidity with for quite a long time. So that some certain folks that still live there were interested in getting federal recognition. And so my dad came down from Odanak, where he was living, to try to help them, see if he could help them in that. So sort of as an ally, but also as an Abenaki person who was not from the Missisquoi community, but wanted to see how he could help out. And my mom was living in Vermont in like a hippie situation,
Is your dad like a lawyer? Does he have a law background?
No, he was just an activist. So there's a few different sort of strategies as tribal nations folks, First Nations folks, trying to get court cases basically to happen. So they were doing fish-ins, which they would go and fish in places without licenses and try to get, the cops and the courts to like try them. And then you test sort of what the Aboriginal title, Aboriginal rights are in that area based on that court case. It's an opportunity to be able to argue for some kind of change.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah. There's lots of these throughout Turtle Island.
Yeah. So I have so many questions for you, and I don't know the order of these, but like the role that your parents played when it came to like instilling a sense of activism in you?
Yeah. I think it's a lot of folks with my background and other, I guess BIPOC folks say this, like, I wouldn't necessarily be an activist if I didn't have to be, but the world around us is such that if I don't speak out about things, and if people like me don't speak out about things, we don't have equality. We don't have that now, right? And it's either you just like accept that you're treated lesser, and you have these injustices systemically and sort of on a person-to-person level, right, as well. And you either accept that you have those and you just, move on, or you are crushed by them. And that's why we see lots of different kinds of mental and physical health impacts in our communities, right? But or you fight. And my family does honestly both. I think most people's families have a bit of both, right? Some people don't have the support that they need. And luckily I'm privileged to say that I got the support that I needed in order to turn me into an advocate and an activist. And I have a lot of other privileges, like my education, and the fact that I have lighter skin compared to my own siblings, right? And so there's a lot that enables me to do what I do right now. But also I come from, I guess, a long line of activists on both sides of my family. So that helps too.
Also, I hear you come from a long line of musicians, like your dad is a musician and you have a lot of musicians in your family. Can you talk about how music, in terms of like musical performance and an appreciation for music, has been treated historically in your family?
Yeah. So I'll start with my mom's side, I guess, because they don't actually have as many musicians, but a great appreciation for the arts. And my grandfather on my mom's side was a writer himself, and an activist, but he also did, poetry and a lot of political essays, kind of similar to the things that I do.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, but a lot of visual artists on that side of the family as well, so writers and visual artists. So I really grew up with a lot of support and encouragement to do that kind of thing, which a lot of folks don't, And then on my dad's side, my dad is a musician. He's a guitarist and singer, and his dad was also a guitarist and mandolin player, and they grew up playing gigs together. And so it's always been a thing in my family, I guess. All of my siblings play music in one capacity or another. 2 drummers. 2 of my brothers are drummers, and
you need 2 drummers.
Yeah, because sometimes one of them isn't as good. I won't say who. And no, I'm just kidding. All my siblings and my uncle plays bass. Everyone has an uncle who plays bass too. That's a thing. Yeah. You
have 5 siblings, and you grew up in rural Maine, like the country, right? Country time.
Yeah. I actually have 6 siblings. One of them is older, and we didn't connect with her until more recently. Oh, wow. She's the oldest, and my dad didn't necessarily know about her, and she's on through my dad, and so I have 6 siblings. But grew up with 5 around me, and I grew up, and my 2 closest siblings grew up together in Maine and New Hampshire.
So what did the scene look like for your childhood in a home with all those kids? Like what did play look like? Also, like, okay, so it sounds like not all 6 kids were around at the same time, but like, how do you relate to silence or alone time because of that family dynamic?
Oh, God. Yeah, I have never, I think to my detriment maybe, I've never been one that needs or thinks that I need much alone time. It is good for me. But I tend to take my alone time when I go for a run or go do something on my own. It's not necessarily like me being sitting alone on a rock in the woods or something, although I think that would be good for me. But I tend to like being surrounded by people, and because I always was. And yeah, you're right to say that my siblings weren't necessarily all around at the same time. I have 2 older brothers that would sort of be in and out of the house, and like in and out of babysitting roles and stuff for me, and my sister, who's just a year and a half older than me. And yeah, it was good growing up with my siblings around. I would definitely not want to be an only child.
Where were you in the order?
I'm the second youngest, but my little brother is 9 years younger than me. So I was the youngest for a long time. And
youngest part 1.
Yeah, youngest part 1. I was actually like quite offended and whiny about it when he was born.
I get it.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. I made this pie chart after Simeon was born, and I posted it on the fridge, and it was like this like Venn diagram of mom's love or whatever. Or it was a pie chart of mom's love, and it was like Autumn, my older sister, like 15%, Simeon like 85%, and like Molly like 1%, and I was like very clearly so jealous of all the attention he was getting.
Which brings me to my next question about you being like performative as a little kid. Mm-hmm. I read that you like love trying to make people happy and laugh while being kind of a goofball. How do you reflect on those early expressions of performance as a kid, and how do you relate to that kid now as like an adult performer?
That's a good question. I've been actually, trying to find more balance in the kinds of roles I play as a performer, I think. In Lula Wiles, it's other than myself, a like white band. And I have found that I tend to be the one who is like talking about all of the less pleasant things, right? Like, and really trying to get those conversations going from stage. And I've been told that I've got the like angry vibe on stage or something, right? And it's not necessarily this lighthearted, goofy kid that I was, and that I am inside, but I have some other projects where I'm able to like really expand and be that way. I have the sort of maybe mysterious band Taco Butt that me and Issa, it's a side project, and we sing and play funny songs, and it's got a lot of improvisation, and it's a pretty liberating experience to play in Taco Butt because we get to spread out in that way.
Taco Butt is a must-see. It is truly a must-see. Also, you guys are kind of mean. Like, Issa's kind of mean in Taco Butt, but it's funny.
Yeah, that's her vibe.
It's like a mean funny. Yeah.
Mean funny.
Okay, questions now about... So this is... You wrote about this, I think in one of your essays. You said, from childhood, Americans are fed distorted images and narratives about natives, from barely human savages in Disney's Peter Pan and Pocahontas to the whooping and leathered fringe sports team mascots and holiday costumes. So growing up, how did your parents or other Native adults around you approach these images and narratives and popular culture with you and your siblings?
I wasn't allowed to watch Peter Pan when I was growing up. Like, my mom especially was like always like, and I ended up seeing it, at a friend's house or something. But there were certain movies that we weren't allowed to see, like, if we saw them at the movie store. Wow, I guess that dates me a little bit. The DVD shop.
VHS.
VHS, that too. I was like, DVDs were like more in my prime when I was like 9. And,
Laserdisc.
Yes, exactly. So there were certain movies we weren't allowed to rent out, and we only had... It
was probably like a mixture of like, you don't want your kids to see Batman Forever or different reasons for Batman Forever and Peter Pan.
Yeah, I don't think I ever saw any of the Batman movies, honestly. I don't know
scary.
why. Are they? Is that why?
Yeah, they're really scary.
We watched Pocahontas, so it wasn't like everything, right? We weren't totally under a rock, but Peter Pan is like explicitly so bad, right? That theme song, right? Savages, barely even human, like literally the words, okay? We only had like Native American Barbie and like Barbies of color. We weren't allowed to have like white Barbie, which that's a cool parenting decision, I think, even though Barbie itself is kind of problematic for lots of reasons. So they're like those sort of like censorship things almost, where it was like they were really trying to like limit my exposure to racist, white supremacist imagery and white dominated white culture stuff, right? Which the effects of which I didn't really fully understand until like now, or the last few years as I've been expanding as a person and growing. The other things to mention were just my mom and dad were really careful to like ask me what I was learning in school, especially in history and social studies and stuff, and really ask like, what did you do for the month of November? Like, what are your Thanksgiving activities in school, right? And then talk to me about those.
Yeah. What did they have to say?
Well, my mom has a habit of getting in fights with like every school board that for any school district that my family has ever
love
been in.
her.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's like a local nuisance to, racist curriculum builders, I guess. But so stuff like that. I just remember specifically, in like 8th grade or 7th grade in middle school when I was learning about the local history of Farmington, Maine, right? And they were like, Pierpont was the last Abenaki person in this part of the world, right? And here we are, an Abenaki family, in our kitchen being like, so what do you think about this? Like, why does this feel weird to you? And then I don't know, I was never allowed to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Like, my mom would write a note to my teachers and be like, she's not standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, right? And like, I was always the only one in the class. So it just like built an awareness of something, I guess, over time. Embarrassment for a while and then reflection.
What has been your experience with the music of the Abenaki people, and how do you relate that into your own musical sensibilities?
Well, it's a complicated question. So Abenaki is, and I say Abenaki too, because I hear it all the time, people mispronouncing it, and it's just in my head. But Abenaki is a mistranslation of Wabanaki, which is sort of the larger area, the confederation of Wabanaki tribes of so-called Maine and actually so-called New England. It stretches all the way down to Wampanoag. That's the same word as Wabanaki, just a different dialect. And it means people of the Dawnland, right? So there's lots of different bands of Native folks, of Wabanaki folks within that. And Abenaki is how the French pronounced that word and how they referred to like the number of different tribes that they were dealing with in colonial times, right? Or the early colonial times. And so I just want to say that because Abenaki music itself is part of this network of Wabanaki music, of Northeastern Native Indigenous music. And Abenaki specific music doesn't necessarily exist because my nation is made up of refugee communities coming in from all of these different bands. And so like I learned the Penobscot honor song because that's a really close dialect to what we speak at Odanak. And like that is our music too, right? And like the Mi'kmaq honor song is the same, but it like the words are a little bit different dialect, right? Anyway, I say this because I grew up hearing some, Wabanaki music at powwow and everything. My dad didn't play a ton around us, but he knows some songs and I hear songs at ceremony, but I don't necessarily know the canon too well. I'm always learning songs and there's a movement to like be writing more songs as well, more tribal songs.
Have you written any?
I've some semi-written too. Yeah.
So it's just trying it out.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because like I'm a songwriter in like the like American idiom of like pop and indie and rock and country and whatever the heck you call it. I really avoid using the word Americana because I hate it. But it's hard to like, or it's just not necessarily hard, but it's just a different thing to channel into to try to write something that is like more like us. And I also don't want to sort of pigeonhole what Native music sounds like because the songs that I write in Lula Wiles are Native music, Yeah, and there's folks like Jeremy Dutcher and everything who like totally are so innovative with the traditional songs and everything. So,
on your Kennedy Center live stream, you were talking about cannibals. Cochino, the cannibal, with the icy heart, and the story like starts off like really terrifying, which made me want to know more about like what is the tradition of telling very scary tales in Wabanaki culture.
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I guess there are a lot, and they're meant to teach you lessons, not to be afraid, but like they're supposed to teach you like how to respond, right, when something scary is happening. So like in that case, and I can't fully tell the story right now because it's out of season, and the snakes will come and get me if I tell it.
Respect.
Yes, but
go watch the stream.
Right, but in that story, like the Kachino shows up and it's really scary, right, and instead of like killing it or something, the Wabanaki woman welcomes it into her home and tries to appeal to its, I guess, like just its humanity. Not that that's really a fitting word for a cannibalistic ice giant, but it's goodness, it's heart, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened when scary people showed up on our shores, right? That's what we did. We welcomed them in. We were like, have some food. You've had a long journey, and so we learned from those things.
Well, after you told the tale, I definitely learned. I thought it was a great tale.
Thank you.
And then the song that you played afterwards was also very good.
Thank you.
So at Maine Fiddle Camp, that's where you were able to, you met Eleanor. She came from your town, so you guys met each other in a different iteration, but you were able to connect with Ellie and Isa at Maine Fiddle Camp. Can you set the scene for your experience at camp, and how do you think having such a strong musical foundation there has impacted your desire for that type of community?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was really excited about that kind of music. And really, Maine Fiddle Camp is like an amalgamation of all these different kinds of music, not just Quebecois, but the Cape Breton music, the like New England traditional music, which is like this dorky thing that I was really excited about at the time. And New England music in itself is just like an amalgamation of all of these different influences, I guess, coming from the South, coming from the North, coming from Cape Breton, coming from Métis tunes being written in the middle of the continent and further west and everything, So I was really excited. I really didn't know what I was doing, as any young bass player. I should have been kicked out of a lot of jams. I don't think I was, but I was just figuring it out. And that's Maine Fiddle Camp is like a really good place where people just figure it out. And it's, welcoming in that way musically. But I also definitely went for the social elements, and I was always sort of getting in trouble, like making out with boys and stuff like that. And, the normal camp stuff too. Yeah. And that's where Ellie and Isa and I performed together for the first time.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you were playing the bass at camp. Mm-hmm. What did you like about the instrument? I hear from you in this interview that you had an uncle that played bass. But how has your relationship to the bass evolved?
Yeah, I think I started playing bass because my dad already had a son that played drums, my older brother, and I wanted to be a musician like Dad. I wanted to be able to jam with Dad, and he played the guitar, he didn't need a guitar player, he didn't need something else, I don't know, bass. I think maybe he even had some words of encouragement for me playing the bass. But I started on clarinet and cello and violin, and then I made my way to bass when I was big enough to play it in 5th grade.
Did you start on electric or upright?
Upright, which maybe is strange, but I liked being the only person doing that in the ensemble. And I don't know, I mean, I have a lot of reflections on why I love the bass now, but I think then I was just really excited to be part of the band.
Yeah.
It's good. It feels good.
Yeah. Jazz and improvisation are a part of your musical identity, which may surprise people. You went to a jazz camp in Brooklyn. You went to Berkeley for jazz. How do you think your affinity and experience in jazz makes you a better musician, a better bandmate, better side woman?
Well, I mean, in all the ways, jazz is it has such specific connotations, and I think people have limited ideas of what jazz is or isn't, right? But improvisation as a framework, I guess, for understanding music is so important, and I think it is really connected to the various kinds of folk music as well. Even in old time music where there's not solos, people are improvising all the time, every time they go through the tune, right? It's not just exactly note for note what you played last time, right? People are putting their own personality into it, their own energy, and I think that's so crucial. And it's what makes music interesting. It's what makes music work and not work in various circumstances, improvisation and just having that kind of a approach, I guess.
What a cool through line.
Yeah, jazz is everything. I really believe that, but I'm gonna, not be too corny about it.
You said, I came to songwriting last. I think the kinds of songs I write are largely based in my experience as a human and as an Indigenous person. So it seems like you've always been a writer. You write beautiful and important essays on matters concerning Native people in America. Your songs cover related subjects just as beautifully. How do you feel writing, whether it be songs, essays, articles? How has writing helped you grasp a strong sense of identity?
That's a cool question. Writing was the first thing that I ever came to it was my first obsession, even sort of before music, or maybe just in a different way, but it was always like something I was so excited about, and in high school I was like in all the writing clubs and, in all the advanced writing classes. Like I wanted to take creative writing classes and everything. I wanted to do spoken word poetry, which I'm glad I graduated from that phase of my life. But, it felt like all of my idols that were like Beat Generation, like poets, I was like, I want to do that. But, writing is so huge. It's really a big way that I process experiences and thoughts. And, some people are external processors, right? Or like internal processors. And I'm just like a writing processor. Like it really takes writing.
A typewriter.
Yeah, I'm a typewriter. It really takes that for me to like really be able to understand things though, and remember things and sort of organize my thoughts. And my favorite writers are the ones who can do that so beautifully about things that are really hard to parse out, like those experiences of oppression and everything that are like so in their nature brain scrambling, and gaslighting and everything. Writing is such an important tool of, it's a tool of power, and reclamation of power through writing. And yeah, I resonate with it that way for sure.
That's awesome. During the pandemic, you created a land trust, Obomsawin Land Trust?
Obomsawin Land Trust, yeah.
Can you explain what the organization does?
Yeah, so, well, there's this movement going on right now, whether you know it or not, called the Land Back Movement. Indigenous people are getting their ancestral lands returned to them in one way or another, ideally by allies sort of coming to the conclusion themselves that environmental, land justice, racial justice all comes down to colonialism and the land, right? The original injustices of this continent, I guess, this hemisphere, and definitely the origins of the climate catastrophe that we're all facing right now. So it's, I guess, inspired or hoping to be a part of the Land Back movement in the Northeast in Wabanaki. And it's led by Indigenous women primarily. We're doing rematriation work, which just means that the women are leading in issues of land justice. And my nation, the Odanak-Abenaki Nation, is not federally recognized, to come full circle, in the United States, right? Our recognition is in Quebec. Our reserves, we have 2 of them. They're both in Quebec. And that is despite the fact that we come from down here, right? We come from south of the border, and we cross into Canada to take refuge from colonial violence. And so the work that Obomsawin is doing is trying to reestablish a presence and a framework really for the future of our nation and our relatives back in our traditional homelands.
All right, I have a couple questions about this. I think it's awesome, and congratulations.
Thank you.
On this amazing work. So if you can help me understand this, you said few Americans know that Indian tribes have a legal status among America's racial and ethnic groups. And the Obomsawin Land Trust is rooted in the Land Back movement, particularly for the Wabanaki homelands, which are divided by the U.S. and Canada border. Am I getting it right so far?
Yes.
Okay. Does that mean, I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but I bet you do. Does that mean that members of Wabanaki Nation have a different kind of like passport or something that allows them passage at the border?
So I do have the answer to this question. The J Treaty, which is a Canadian treaty, makes it so that I can cross into Canada with my tribal ID. So when you're an enrolled member of a tribe, you can have a federally recognized tribe or a state recognized tribe. You have a tribal ID. And to get into Canada, I can use that ID. In the United States, it doesn't work that way. So this is my understanding. Like for tribes that are recognized in the United States, you can't just cross into Canada with your tribal ID. that doesn't work unless there's a specific situation. I think the Blackfeet have that kind of situation. Maybe certain Cree communities.
So back and forth, the U.S. and Canada have to recognize. And the Blackfeet have that?
I think so. I don't want to, like,
Okay.
Yeah, but
sure.
Certain tribes do, basically. A lot of the tribes that took refuge in the borderlands, right? And so they were divided by the border like us. You know, I don't know what the situation is down in with the Mexican border. I think there is something similar for the Tohono O'odham and other nations down there, but I'm not positive. But yeah, so that being said, I can't get into the United States with my ID, I don't think, right? I would need my American passport.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I know that, like, during, like, this passage, how has this passage worked, like, during the pandemic? Like, Canada's closed, as far as I know.
It is.
So does that also apply to First Nations people who have recognition?
So it's been really complicated. It does not apply on face value. It doesn't apply. And my dad was able to get back and forth to his home on the res up there and to his home down here and to all of his family down here, right, for the first part. But they increased the restrictions a few months ago, and so that even if you were a tribal citizen and you could use, you know, your J Treaty right to cross into Canada, you had to provide a certificate of a negative COVID test having been taken within 3 days of your crossing.
Oh,
so this happened, right, and that was a really big complicating factor, and I'll tell the story because I think it really speaks to how violent the border is. My dad and I and my partner were trying to cross so that Dad could get his vaccine at the reserve, and they had just made this this new restriction, and we didn't know about it, and we got turned away. And that night, my dad contracted COVID. And he's 73 years old. He's been a smoker for over 50 years, right? Like, and because he didn't have a place to stay, right, that was safe, he stayed in a house where people were known to have had COVID. Oof. That is the power of the colonial border, right, against Indigenous people, that, like, going to get his vaccine was not accepted. And he's okay. You know, he recovered, which is miraculous, honestly.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, but, like, that border is fake, you know, and it is a power, I guess, a domination tool used against Indigenous people, and most highly impacting Indigenous peoples whose homelands and whose resources exist on both sides, and regular access is a part of our sustenance. It's a part of our ability to survive. And this feels like a very clear example.
For sure. Now, I want to hear a little bit more about the recent win for the land trust of the Passamaquoddy tribe that you helped facilitate.
Yeah, so it's not a land trust. It's they're a tribal nation. They're federally recognized. So,
but I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. But the Obomsawin Land Trust helped facilitate this.
No. Okay.
No.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm going to correct you. Yeah, I was part of it through Sunlight Media Collective, which is an amazing Wabanaki and non-Indigenous sort of allies-led media maker team, basically, who document stories about sort of at the intersections of tribal nations and environmental justice. I think that's the official description of them, right? So we're covering all these stories, documenting all these stories about, like what's going on in Wabanaki country. And so I was part of that, just documenting what was happening up there. But I will say the Passamaquoddy tribe was able to get into their protection and have returned to them an island of 140 acres right next to their reserve community, Medok-Miiguk. And they had to buy it, but basically it was for sale through this like creepy website online that's like, buy an island, buy your own island paradise, right? And it was just like for sale as a private island. I guess people that have money just buy islands, like...
Yeah.
It's sickening. It's sickening. And anyway, so they noticed that it was for sale, and they worked with this collective called First Light Learning Journeys, which is a collective of conservation groups who are doing anti-racist work and trying to basically right the wrongs that the conservation movement has caused Indigenous people, which are massive. These wrongs are very extensive, right? The entire American conservation movement was started as a way to dispossess Indigenous peoples, right? Just another mechanism by Teddy Roosevelt, who was also a eugenicist.
Boo.
Woohoo. Right. So anyway, I just really went on a tangent there. But First Light got these conservation groups together, and they were able to fund the repurchase of this island that was stolen from the tribe. And it is now going back into Passamaquoddy tribal land, and that is incredible.
I loved in reading about you and reading your essays, learning about the concept of rematriation, which you explained a little bit, and thinking about the role of women in Wabanaki culture. Like, what has been your experience of being a woman in your culture been like?
Yeah, I'm still learning what it means to be a Wabanaki woman. Femininity in the American sort of cultural ethos is not something that I've really identified with much growing up because of what is presented. And I think a lot of people are feeling that way at this time, just really reflecting on what they've been taught by mass media and by the dominant society about like what it means to be a woman. Like,
I know, like, thank God.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. For
For
real.
fuck's sake.
Yeah, for fuck's sake. I know. It's awful. And like, yeah, and I mean, womanhood is whatever you want it to be, right? And not to knock anyone, but I did not identify with, white Barbie, and I did not identify with all of what was coming at me from pop culture, right, about that. So I think in Wabanaki culture, it's a relearning and an unlearning process of those ideas, and really accepting my role as a woman, because like I said, in the American context, I don't accept that role that I was sort of encouraged to accept. And so something I've learned is that we are, in our traditions, we are the leaders of environmental justice, and in standing for the land and protecting the water. And that's why you see, folks like Winona LaDuke out there, and folks like Buffy St. Marie out there, right? Like talking about, why are the buffalo gone? Or, right, like talking about all these issues, folks like me, right? And it's, I think my learning that role was a big reason why I started Bomazine Land Trust. And, and Bomazine, in return, I guess, is a way for us to explore that. So we're doing food sovereignty work right now. I'm wearing this dirty T-shirt as I'm talking to you, and my fingernails are covered in dirt because I've been planting corn and tobacco, right? And that's part of what it means to be a Wabanaki woman, I guess.
In your National Performance Network essay about presenting, can you help me with this word, indigeneity?
Indigeneity.
Indigeneity.
Yes.
Indigeneity. You were asking all these questions about how your band, label, and audience will react to your songs about the Native experience, and the questions were all very valid, and some of them made me very nervous for you, especially because I have definitely been that audience member that will run up to you and talk to you for 20 minutes about something completely inappropriate. That's all in our past now, Molly. But I do recognize that. It makes me wonder, how you balance the need to, protect yourself, not only yourself, but also protect your heritage, with the need to educate and talk about who you are and what has happened to Indigenous people in America.
And what is still happening.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a good question. The stage can be, and I would like to have this be the case, and I took measures to make this the case in Lula Wiles. The stage can be a protective mechanism in itself, and it isn't always, right? But having that barrier between the audience and you in terms of I have the microphone, I'm the one talking, this is the etiquette of being at a show, right? This is my space where I can say what I need to say, whether that's in my lyrics or in my presence on the stage, right? The banter. And in Lula Wiles, it got to a point where I I asked Ellie and Issa to do the merch table, and I said I can't have those interactions with the crowd anymore because it was too violent. You know, it was painful. It was traumatizing in a lot of ways. And they did that. They were like, of course, we understand this. Yes. It was good of them to do that.
That sounds like a really good boundary.
To do. Yeah. It was important for me to set that boundary. And, you know, I think every performer has things that they really don't want to, you know, experience behind the merch table. And a lot of people are reluctant to go and meet with fans. Some people don't, you know, if you're like at a certain level in your career, you don't have to go out and greet the fans. So I'll say that like they took that hit for me because they understood that, or I had let them in and made them understand, I guess, that it was that important. Yeah. And for, I guess the other thing I'll say is through my music, I'm talking about things, and on stage I'm talking about things, and I'm setting these boundaries. But writing about them in articles is also something that for me is regenerative, I guess. It's not as exhausting as it can be in, you know, talking about things in performance settings. And I also do all this other activism behind the scenes that, are not really about directly engaging with white folks to educate them. So
it's probably good for you, for your sanity.
Yeah.
You've talked about your support of mass movements for liberation like Black Lives Matter and oppression of other indigenous people, particularly from Latin America. How do you relate to other movements for oppressed peoples, and what do you think we can all learn from each other in our each given movements?
I think that a lot of these movements are actually just the same. And I think that what we need to try to understand is how. You know, so why does the Black Lives Matter movement exist? We can talk about that. Why does the movement against folks like Monsanto and movement against, you know, like mass extractive industry and exploitative industry and the burning of the Amazon, why are those existing, right? Imperialism in its original forms and today are like quite one and the same, you know, and indigenous and Black and brown folks have always been bearing the brunt of the damage and the violence in these, I guess, global systems for profit, you know, and so like I think studying history is a really good way to understand that better, studying history as documented by the people who were most affected in those times. But yeah, I mean, I think a big problem that we see in activism is the sort of siloing off of different issues, right? People are like, I'm going to be an environmental justice activist, and I'm going to be a BLM activist, and I'm going to like talk about homelessness and poverty, and I'm going to talk about, you know, substance abuse disorders, right? And they are all interconnected. And the more that we can see that, the more effective we'll be in dismantling the real issues.
So questions about Lula Wiles on the new record. You're a Native person in a band with two white people in a genre that is very white. And in reading about like your experience at Folk Alliance, where there have been real efforts to include Indigenous and people of color in these white folk spaces, you experience what you called a cognitive dissonance because you feel like you recognize those efforts and you see those Indigenous musicians creating community, but you feel like you can't bring your band into that space. Can you expand on that experience and how that might make you feel isolated?
I think that it's important for white folks to recognize, and I think many do, that they're not entitled to every space, right? They're not entitled to be in every room that exists. And, you know, sometimes there's a room that is holding space for Indigenous people or Black folks, you know, or whatever other identity. And, you know, Lula Wiles was functioning for a long time as a three-headed monster where we do everything together and we are Lula Wiles, three women that make up Lula Wiles. And that doesn't work in certain spaces. So as a band and as, you know, as a musician wanting to be able to bring the music that I make into spaces where there's folks that understand what I'm saying better or, you know, that look more like me or whatever it is, right? I am not able to do that as a member of Lula Wiles. And so that, encourages me to do other kinds of music. And that's a big reason why I've always played jazz and always kept that career growing as well on the other side of things. And I have other projects going on now that are allowing me to do that better. And I'm hoping to do more stuff as a band leader, as well. Because, the isolation is not a sustainable career plan, I'll say.
Right. On the song Everybody, it's about how much time we spend online crafting our personas and the obsessive control we have over ourselves. And you have written so much about the white gaze, and you said this dissonance of crafting your persona runs deeper for women of color. And I think that this song might have tones of that. How do you reckon with that, and how has the evolution of how you've controlled your persona either on stage or online, how has that evolved for you?
Yeah. So it's funny, your analysis of, I feel like everyone has a different take on Everybody Connected, which it makes me happy. It means it's like a Rubik's Cube kind of song, which I like. I think that social media is one of the more toxic ways of human existence, I will say. Maybe precisely because we have all of that control. And I think of control in itself as something that I'm trying to dismantle, because I think, our obsession with having control over things is learned. It's colonial, it's a very Western society idea, that comes from, I guess, folks who write about repatriation talk about this, and indigenous issues, I guess, that, in Genesis, in the Bible, they specifically say that man is unique within the ecosystem, right? And has the unique ability or responsibility or role of dominating and domesticating his surroundings, right? His surroundings. And repatriation is actually no. First of all, her surroundings. Second of all, why not be a part of the ecosystem, right? And so from that, there's from that buds all of indigenous philosophy, I guess. I mean, that's a generalization, but So social media is just another microcosm of that. I don't know. And I think online, you just see a lot of toxic behaviors magnified because it's just these tiny little blips of human existence, right? And a lot of it is trying to make your life seem flawless or your face seem flawless or whatever, right? Or trying to say exactly the thing that will make people think such and such of you with, running. This is silly to think about in such philosophical terms maybe, but running a Lula Wiles Facebook page, right? You have to think about what's going to reflect your band ethos, what's going to get the clicks, what's not. I don't know. I think that Everything Connected is about a bit more than just the digital world, although I think of the digital world as just an extension of our colonial earth. Yeah. Did I answer your question at all?
Yes. I think
sorry.
So. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe this just shows how my mind works a little bit.
Well, I feel like my question was
all the
down
time.
here on the first floor, and you took it up to the 10th floor.
I'm sorry.
Which I appreciate as your fan and someone who has to use the dictionary when I read an article that you write. Now I'm going to ask another first floor question that you can take up to the 10th floor. Tell me about your dog.
Lux! She's so sweet. She's on the other side of the door in this building that I'm in right now, and she's probably missing me because we have that kind of relationship. So her name is Lux. That is a word in the Penobscot and Passamaquoddy language for Wolverine, because she has very cute little white eyes. She's black dog with white markings, and we thought she looked like a badger when we got her, but in Wabanaki we didn't have badgers indigenously. We had wolverines. That was the closest thing. She is not. She's an Alaskan Husky, so yes, because I guess Alaskan Huskies are a mix of lots of different things, including Siberian Huskies and German Shepherds and all these different breeds, I guess. Specifically,
Up your dogs.
Yeah, specifically for sled dog racing, right? For mushing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I'm also Jewish, so I like the name Lox because bagels and yolks, you know.
Right.
Of course.
On the day that the record came out, you posted a pic of you and Lox on a solo hike. And it sounded like you really needed it that day. So in general, like when you have a moment like that, what does a hike like that and giving yourself that space mean to you on a day like that?
Well, it was an emotional day for a lot of different reasons. And thinking back to when we were in the studio recording that record, you know, it was the weekend of Juneteenth and BLM uprisings were in full swing. And we were just, I guess I was just watching white America have this like epiphany about itself. And you know, and I hope that learning journey continues. And I see that it is in a lot of ways, although it is grueling at times to witness. So I don't know, I was reflecting a lot on what the songs are about and the extreme need for some commentary and a lot of those discussions to come out and a lot of reflection to happen in the world. And you know, the band itself has done a lot of work and had a lot of hard times, you know, going through those processes, I guess. And so that was all behind me on that day when I was taking some solo time and just trying to, you know, be happy to be in my homeland with my dog.
Oh. All right, Molly, let's do the lightning round.
Great.
Okay, here we go. What was the first song you learned on the guitar?
You Always Hurt the One You Love. The Ones You Love? It's Mills Brothers. I think that's what they're called, right? The Mills Brothers? They do like barbershop stuff.
We'll take it.
Yeah, from that movie Blue Violet. It was like this hipster movie about, you know, Blue Valentine.
Blue Valentine. All right, very Molly answer.
Blue Velvet? Whatever.
What is your karaoke song?
I don't do karaoke because I'm so bad at it.
I don't believe it.
I really am.
Who is your first celebrity crush?
Taboo from the Black Eyed Peas.
Who is the nicest musician you've ever met?
Oh, that's such a sweet question. Ifo Donovan?
Oh,
she's
yeah.
like such an auntie. Like, she's like auntie, like you're like, oh my God, do you hate me? Like, or are you scolding me? And then she's like, I'm so proud of you. And she always remembers to text you to congratulate you about stuff.
First album you bought with your own money?
I think it was Pink. I don't remember what the album was, but Pink, the you know, singer.
Did you watch the documentary?
I did not.
Everybody's talking about it.
Oh gosh.
What was your first concert?
Black Eyed Peas. TD Garden in Boston.
Fulfilling a teen dream.
Yes.
What is a book you are reading or the last book that you read?
Ooh, books. I've been reading, I think, The Beat Queen by Louise Erdrich, but I kind of fell off the wagon. It's embarrassing.
Right. Get back on. Flying or invisibility?
Oh, gosh. Flying.
Last one. Where is the most beautiful place you've ever visited?
Mount Katahdin in Maine.
Oof. Love it. Mm-hmm. All right, that's it. We did it.
Hey, we did it. And my computer just told me that it has 10% battery, and this is perfectly timed.
Oh, my God. Thank you so much, Molly, and thanks for giving us all this great information and for, like, everything that you do for music and for us in the world.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be able to be, have some incongruous thoughts on this podcast.
Yes. Basic Folk this week was produced by John Nungesser. Alex Stanton of Townspeople composes our music. Basic Folk is on the American Songwriter Podcast Network. I'm your host, Cindy House. Pleasure to have you listening to the pod today. And if you liked what you heard, this is a really good one to share with your friends and family, so I highly encourage that. You can find Basic Folk wherever you get podcasts or at basicfolk.com, and we'll talk to you next time. Okay, bye.